Dear friends, today we have a very special guest with us. Today we have Ariana Doolan with us, who recently created history by becoming the youngest female ever to be elected to the Queensland Parliament. She also happens to have Indian and South African roots. Ariana, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Ariana, let's begin with your journey. But tell us a bit about yourself and how did you really decide to get into politics? And you're so young, so tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so it wasn't a career path that I thought I would take leaving school. I actually studied business and environmental science at Griffith University, so thought I might end up working in a not for profit, which I actually did. So I started working for a charity called Zero Positive for Schools. So they were monitoring solar in 800 schools across Queensland, and we were providing educational resources on energy efficiency to students. And that's sort of how I got involved in politics, because I started working with a lot of local members to do tree planting events and different fundraising events that help and support me. But then I spoke to the Shadow Environment Minister about getting a government contract for our organisation to see whether we could, be able to monitor solar in more schools. And I had a conversation with the Shadow Environment Minister, and he said, "Hey, look, like, there's an opportunity for you to put your hand up to run, and we need more young women in politics. So why don't you give it a go?" So I decided to do it because I thought I wouldn't want to regret not doing it. So yeah, I guess I put my hand up and ended up winning the election.
What would you say contributed to your success? Because I mean, elections are very, very tough to win. I mean, any election is tough to win. So, what do you think is the reason for your success?
Well, I think there was a couple of reasons. The first one was that Queenslanders wanted to change the government. So I think the LNP helped me in that sense, that people were voting for a Liberal National Party government. And then I think being young helped me, because a lot of the older people in our community saw me as their grandchild, and they really took me under their wing. And I think they liked to see that a young person was having a go. And we had Wyatt Roy as our federal member, and he was 19 when he was elected. So they're sort of used to seeing young people in politics in our area. So they weren't, I guess, afraid to vote for me, because they knew that they've done it before, and he was a good local member. So yeah, and I think too, it was the personability and the connection that I was having with people, and I think that I got that from my mum, who's really good talking to people, and I sort of learnt from her, network and communicate.
Yeah. And what would be like, if I were to ask you, what would be the three or four most important things that you want to undertake as a Queensland MP in the coming time?
Yeah. So I would say our number one priority is making our community safer. So we just yesterday passed the Making Queensland Safer law, so that became legislation today, and that will ensure that if a young person commits an adult crime like murder, that they're going to get a consequence for that. Secondly, I think as a young person, we're all young people across Queensland are struggling to enter the housing market. So I'm wanting to work with our government to ensure that young people can have the dream of owning their own home. So one of our policies we've put forward is removing stamp duty for first home builds. And then I want to make some changes in our education system. So this is something that's, I guess, important to me, which is making sure that our education sets young people up for the real world, because at the moment I don't think it does. I left school not knowing how to do simple things like your taxes and, how to go out and get a loan for a car and that sort of thing. And that's not what we're taught in school. So I want to make our education a little bit more realistic than what it is.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about yourself. You have Indian or African roots. So tell us about a bit about yourself. That would be nice.
Yeah, so my mum's from Durban, South Africa. So she's South African Indian. And so her family came over here when she was 14. So they were escaped apartheid. So my was a strawberry picker actually on Wyatt Roy, who was the federal member here, on his family farm, and was a small business owner. And then, yeah, my mum ended up becoming a teacher, and that's where she met my dad. So my dad's Australian, so he grew up in a town called Narangba, and yeah, they got married, and we lived in Redcliffe, and that's where my mum bought a news agency. So she left teaching for a little while, and yeah, opened up a news agency where I worked in there for a little bit, and then ended up moving to Beachmere, which is in Pumicestone. Dad was at the Glasshouse Christian College as a teacher, so I went to school there. And then when I was 16, I ended up on a Netflix TV series, so I did a bit of acting work. And then from there, I got a scholarship to study business and environmental science, and ended up working as a reptile handler at a zoo on the Gold Coast, and then became a teacher aide at some of our local schools. And then from there, I started working as a program coordinator at the not-for-profit I was talking about earlier.
Oh, wow, you've had quite a lot of interesting experiences at at a fairly young age. I would like to ask you what inspires you? What is the inspiration behind getting into politics, which is essentially public service at such a young age?
I think it's because I've always sort of been connected to community. Like since a young age, I've always been involved in different charities and raising money to, I guess, make the community a better place. And yeah, I guess it just happened that the opportunity came up to have this public service role and make changes in my community. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I think it's a learning experience regardless of the outcome. And yes, I guess what inspired me is just that I can help people every day. And I think that's what's most important, is not what you get, but what you give to others.
Yeah. And finally, I would like to ask you this, Ariana, that when we talk of politics in Australia, I mean there are some questions regarding diversity and the fact that maybe politics more than maybe some other fields doesn't reflect now the general population of Australia in terms of how diverse it is. Uh, what would you like to say about that? Because it's I mean your story is really inspiring,
Yeah.
and I believe that I mean Australia is one of the best countries in the world in terms of the success of multiculturalism in Australia. I mean, what would you like to say? And if people, there might be many people who may be interested in getting in politics, but they might feel that their background may be a hindrance. So what would you like to tell them, people from different ethnic backgrounds who might be thinking of getting into politics, if you could
Yeah.
share your thoughts on them?
Like it didn't even come into question my background. I think it's actually more helpful if you want to get involved in politics and you have a different cultural background. So we are, like, our party selected candidates that were different, had a different cultural background, had different life experience. That's what we wanted to see in our party. So those who were selected did reflect that. So we had I think there was 3 of us who had an Indian background that was selected as candidates. I was just the only one that got through. And then on the other side, on the other party, in the Labor Party, they had the first Muslim woman to ever be elected at this election. So I think we are getting a lot of people joining political parties from different cultural backgrounds and putting their hand up to run for Parliament. And in terms of gender equality as well, we've got 50-50 in Queensland Parliament, male-female. So yeah, I think we've come a really long way. And what I would say to anyone looking, regardless of their cultural background, it's just not something that people go, oh, no, you can't do that because you look this certain way. It's actually, this is a good thing because you bring a different perspective to Parliament.
All right. Ariana, thank you so much for taking out time today and for speaking with us. Thank you so much.
No worries.